Okay. Yeah. Okay, comrades, thank you very much for coming to this event in our learning play experience. And we're looking at the idea of radical pantomime and planting a seed that will hopefully eventually grow to a full
A
production.
huge beanstalk.
Yeah, but yes, a huge beanstalk. Yeah, and then somebody will come along and chop it down. Um, but I've been speaking to the some of the comrades from the Netherlands, and they've gone pantomime. But it is a particularly British form of theatre that happens generally at Christmas time. Um, and it is very much a sort of family experience, and it involves a lot of sort of body humor. It invariably is based on a sort of mythological or fairy story. Um, it will have certain characteristics like cross-dressing. The pantomime dame is invariably played by a man, and the sort of leading young man is invariably played by uh, a woman, a young woman. It involves a lot of audience participation. It's usually now a very sort of controlled form, like there are particular rituals that involve the audience being led to shout,
Behind you.
yeah, behind you, and then there'll be something said, and they encourage the audience to say, "Oh no, you didn't. Oh yes, I did. Oh no, you didn't." Back and forth for a bit, that sort of thing. And the particular one that I was in first, Jack and the Beanstalk, and I vowed I'm never doing pantomime again because I had to jump into a big barrel, and turn sort of upside down and pop back up again. And with the nature of pantomime, it's usually you're doing 3 shows a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. And I kept banging the base of my spine every time I went into this. And so I ended up with this big, huge open wound that's sore.
That's very sad.
The base of my spine. And jumping off the giant table, there's a raked stage, which meant I had to just land and stay still, make sure I do, otherwise I'd be in the audience. The soles of my feet were as if had been in the. I don't know if you've seen the film Midnight Express, where they beat the soles of the feet until they're all bruised. So I was hobbling around this place, Perth in Scotland, where the pantomime was on, hobbling around, it bruised me, and a huge open sore on my back. And I said, never again. Especially, I think, because I was a young punk that was quite snobby about general entertainment. We were quite elitist, probably, but I like to think was we were avant-garde. But I've come round to recognizing the importance of it as community events and the worth of it and the potential of it above all. And that this could be radicalized. I know that they're in Glasgow, they would have a summer panto as well, in a place near me, in which that was invariably using political jokes and a sort of political basis of the type of characters. And that can definitely be built on, I think. It originates apparently, I found, thanks to DeepSeek, that pantomimus comes from Roman times, but that was a solo silent performance, which was outlawed when Christianity came along as pagan. So it must have been pretty good. But the Greeks back then, they also had pantomimos, which was imitator of all, but again very gestural rather than spoken. Whereas the Roman mimus was spoken, was body, stock characters, and involved cross-dressing. So it seems that it's come from that, but it also then grew through European theatre forms that had similarities. Comedy dell'arte from Italy, those type of characters certainly had an effect. So they took that side of things.
Pulcinella.
Punch and Judy, yes, well, that comes from the Commedia dell'arte as well. And I mean, I'd like to look at then being able to find a way in which these type of forms, theatre forms like puppetry and masks, can be added to it. I'm not out to just make. There's a pantomime form that is quite rigid, really, but I'd be looking to expand on that. And in the way that, and it's one of the things that I wanted to just put, we can only get so far with it tonight, but is this idea, if it was Jack and the Beanstalk and this idea of this character, Jack, which I've got a couple of ways to explore that character, but Chris knows a bit. I mean, I'm just slightly worried if you're going to stand up that you don't bump your head on that,
Well,
but you don't have to stand up. You'll be fine.
Okay, so if you're a 3 or 4-year-old, what's the funniest?
So they'll turn that one.
What's the funniest possible joke? Well, I think it's probably the policeman. He has his big club and he smacks Punch on the head, and he's dead. And then suddenly he pops back to life again, and it's very, very, very funny. One of the remarkable achievements, really, of 20th century anthropology was Claude Lévi-Strauss, the great founder of structuralist anthropology, who discovered that all the world's magical myths and fairy tales, not just Jack and the Beanstalk, but Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Little Red Riding and all those other stories, he was looking at North and South American magical tales, they are all one myth only. The end of the day is just one fundamental, basic myth spread right across the entire planet, and all the different myths are basically variations on a theme. And the theme is precisely that funniest of all jokes. Because essentially, boiling it all right down, I mean, Lévi-Strauss uses terms like being and nothingness, to be and not to be, but actually the last myth in his 4th volume of Mythologie, the Science of Mythology, is a story of 2 moons. And of course, the moon knows how to die. If you follow the moon, do it this way, and the moon's really anxious about it, we should know how to die, do it this way, and you die, and then pop back to life again. And so the stories, all at the simplest basic form, is like this. We are in this world. It's the world of the living. Normal, ordinary things happen. People are eating, people are moving around, some people are having sex. There's light, you can see where you're going. So this is the world of the living. And then something happens. There's a movement into the other world, the land of the dead. And it's sparked, this movement, usually by a flow of blood. So you're in this world, you're eating cooked food, all sorts of normal things happen. There's a little flow of blood or Red Riding Hood or something, usually red, but it doesn't have to be. Maybe somebody's pricked their finger, people bleeding from the nose. But anyway, so some signal of that kind, usually a red one. Suddenly, you've moved into a different world. It's as different as it could possibly be, the land of the dead. And there's nothing magical about that. It's just we were alive, and now we're dead. And now comes the magical bit. We come back from the dead. And that's the story. I'm not sure how much Tam wants me to go on, but I mean, Jack and the Beanstalk is a very good example of precisely that. Now, when I first came across Jack and the Beanstalk, it was about 1980 something. I was giving a talk at RAG, and because somebody had mentioned Jack and the Beanstalk, and I loved some stories and I didn't like others. I very much liked The Sleeping Beauty because it fitted my theory. Because Sleeping Beauty, she pricks her fingers, a flow of blood, and off she goes into the under the dead for a whole 100 years. It takes a long time for her to come back. I didn't really like Jack and the Beanstalk because where's the blood? And one of my students, colleagues, Max Pearson, he said, Chris, he said, why don't you do a bit of research? Look at the earliest known version of Jack and the Beanstalk. There's huge amounts of blood. Because in that version, and I won't read it out because it'd take a bit too long, but I haven't really got all of it. What happens is, it's called The Story of Jack Spriggins and the Enchanted Bean. And what happens in this earliest printed version we know about is that when Jack plants the bean, it sprouts up so suddenly, so quickly, that it bangs him on the nose and he gets a terrible nosebleed. And while he's bleeding, he says, I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. And he starts noticing that there's this huge beanstalk which hit him on the nose and made him bleed. It's going right up into the sky. And there's a feature in this version of the story, the oldest version, which I was absolutely astonished by because it completely vindicated kind of Lévi-Strauss's predictions, but above all my predictions. So my prediction is that this movement between Earth and sky is the movement between dark moon and full. At dark moon you bleed. When you're bleeding, everything's bloody. Any flesh is raw and bleeding. You don't eat raw flesh. You can only allow to eat flesh that's cooked. So you've got to remove all the blood. So if there's lots of blood around, you're going to be getting very, very hungry. Well, in this version, Jack calls in at an inn. He's arrived at one of the leaves of this huge beanstalk, and there's an inn up there. Well, that's encouraging. He might have a meal up there. He thought to rest for a time, and he goes strutting like a crow in a gutter. What have you to eat, landlord? Says he. Ooh, everything in the world, sir, says the landlord. Why then, says Jack, give me a neck of mutton and broth. Alas, says the landlord, tomorrow is market day. How unfortunate it is. I cannot get you a neck of mutton tonight if it was to save my soul. Well, then, get me something else, says Jack. Have you any veal? No, indeed, sir, not at present. But there is a fine calf fatting at Mr. Jenkinson's that will be killed on Saturday next. But have you any beef in your house, says Jack. Why, truly, sir, says the landlord. If you had been here on Monday last, I believe, though I say it that should not say it, you never saw so fine a sirloin of beef as we had, and plum pudding too, which the justice who dined here, and their clerks and constables, entirely demolished. And though I got nothing by them, yet their company was a credit to my household. Zan, says Jack, have you nothing in the house? I'm hungry, I'm starving. So Jack hears a cock crowing and demands that this be killed and broiled. The landlord refuses because the cock belongs to the squire. So then Jack asks for a hen to be killed. But all the hens are incubating eggs, which should hatch in a week. Have you no eggs in the house? Asked Jack. No, sir, indeed, answered the landlord, but jest eggs, which we make of chalk. Why then, says Jack, what the devil have you got? Why, to tell you the truth, sir, I don't know that I've anything in the house to eat. And then the narrator explains, thus was poor Jack plagued by the enchantment of his grandmother, who was resolved to lay him under her ill tongue so long as her power lasted. So, I mean, all I'm saying here is that not many people know about Jack being absolutely hungry and starving in the funniest possible way, because there's all this food around, but of course it's all kind of not available just now. So I don't know. I'm simply saying that my model, which is kind of Lévi-Strauss's model, but a bit simplified and made a bit more realistic, is that as we became human, and we had what we described earlier this afternoon as this sex strike, nobody wants to be on sex strike forever. You want to have a periodicity to it. And the way to do that was to synchronize by using the moon as your clock. Throughout waxing moon, you might be hungry because nobody's hunting anything and everything's bleeding. And any flesh you bring back is going to be raw. At full moon, you light the fires, you cook the meat, you remove the pollution from the meat, the stuff, and you render this raw meat at last edible. and then you have a period of feasting and lovely, enjoyable fun and sex and stuff until Dark Moon when everything starts again. But the critical point is that in that period of waxy moon, the period of ritual power, you should be either very, very hungry, or at least you're certainly not going to be eating roast beef. And if you find a single fairy story in the world where you're in seclusion or bleeding or whatever, and you're eating roast beef, my whole theory will be wrong. But so far, no exceptions to that rule have been found, indicating that Claire Lévi-Strauss, maybe you could say, and Chris Knight, were right. All the world's myths, right across the world, amount to one myth only. And I just wanted to say one other possible thing, which is, I don't know if I've got the right piece of paper here, but that bleeding from the nose is a version of male menstruation, and I might even have a thing here. I'm not sure if I've got it or not. Yes, here we are. Yeah. This is a rather male menstruation. That's right. Yes, okay. So this is from the a book called The High Valley, about the Gahuku Gama, the book by Kenneth Reed, and he talks about how, and this is directly linked to that motif in the story about bleeding from the nose. Men don't normally menstruate. Well, I don't have to tell you that, it's fairly well-known fact, but they can do it. And in the early period of evolution, in order to be ritually powerful, you had to menstruate. And so, okay, men might find it a bit painful to do it, but, where there's a will, there's a way. So this is the Gahuku Gama method. The males, in going through initiation, would bleed from the nose, just like Jack in the story. I'm going to stop in a minute. And what you do is all the young men would show what real men they were by menstruating. And you'd stand up on this cliff in front of all the other men, and you get some very sharp, razor-sharp grass. And you push it right up your nose, right through your nose and down into your throat, till your whole nose is flowing with blood. So Reed just describes one particular, very, very courageous man. He moved out into the river. He was holding two cigar-shaped objects fashioned from the razor-sharp leaves of green pit-pit, flourishing them like a conjurer in a spotlight, raising them above the level of his shoulders. He tilted his head back and thrust the rolls of leaf into his nostrils. My flesh recoiled in shock, nerves contracting as though they were seared by the pain that must have swept through his own body as his fingers soared at the protruding ends of the wadded leaves, thrusting them rapidly up and down inside his nose. He withdrew the bloody leaves and lowered his head toward the water. Blood gushed from his nose. So one after another, these men would prove that they could do it. Horrendous pain imaginable. Obviously, it's just an experience they would never forget. But for the reasons I've suggested, it is actually a ritual corresponding to some version of a story remarkably like Jack and the Beanstalk. And then just one more thing about blood. There's, of course, the famous lines. Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll have his bones to grind my bread.
Yes, thank you, Chris. So Jack, that a very important figure that has been universal, across continents. I mean, this is a book of stories of Scottish traveller tales, all about this character Jack, but he takes all different sorts of forms. It's Jack in Germany, Russia, America, Canada, and France, Holland, even in Africa and in China. Though he may have a different name, the tales about him are the same. But he's not just one particular person. He can take many forms. Like I say, he's a sort of piece of every man. And I've been learning about Jack a good bit from a Scottish folklorist and storyteller called Erin Farley, who would have loved to have been with us and has already been. She's in the audience. Great, Erin. Hello.
Should I bring her in as a panelist or?
Well, if she's, yeah, that would be great. Yeah. I'm going to play a little bit of one of her tracks because she's brought out an EP called Jack this year. And just the beginnings of what she says on it is in the beginning, there was Jack. Jack the underdog, the hero, the trickster, the daft laddie. Jack who drives his mum daft and saves the day. Jack is always at the start of a journey. Zero, the fool. Jack dances between tales and across continents uncatchable. Jack is the spark in the everyday, the light behind the grey of Chicago's skyscraper and Aberdeenshire sky. The reason she brings up Chicago is that in Chicago house music, Jack Master, there is Jack there as well. So you see Jack. At night, something shifts below our feet. Something shimmers in the darkness, as if the music was coming from the earth itself. We work like roots. The beat twists on and downwards. The voices of those who went before echo through it. Let it drown out those who tell you your place in the world. Let it spark love for the world's place in you. We are Jack. That's from Erin Farley, 2025. Now, I'd love to play you one of the tracks with her, with the music. It's fantastic, but it just doesn't work on Zoom. Music obliterates the whole thing. So I do have one of the tracks where she's talking about a particular tree that is called Old Croovy, and that in relation to Jack. And what I thought was also just wonderful that it connected up, Bertolt Brecht loved trees. He thought trees were so important to us. And so I think he would appreciate this as well. I've got a little speaker, that you'll be able to hear a little bit of this. What's that?
She's on screen. She's on screen.
She's on screen. Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Would you like to see something about Old Croovy before I play the bit of the track?
I mean, one of the things that would be good for people to know is that Old Croovy is literally a real tree in Aberdeenshire, and Stanley Robertson, the traveller storyteller who this story comes down to us from, sort of knew this area, this part of the world really well, and it's so sort of rooted in the real world as well as this kind of magical other world, which is it's a brilliant combination. But I think, yeah, the whole folk tale is so about, like, Jack is working for the laird with the black heart, and it's a very sort of environmental rights, but also workers' rights folk tale as well. There's loads of sort of resonances coming in throughout it. I don't want to go on too much.
No, thank you. That's great. Well, I've got to, because it's a lovely long track, but I've just was going to play about the first half of it, of Old Croovy, the story and the Foley version of it. Let's see how that comes over.
Once, away back years ago, there was Jack. Jack lived with his mother by the old drove road at Lunfannon. Jack's mother had worked all her days for the laird there, who Aberdeen kent as the Laird of the Black Heart. He was a cruel man, and he never paid her a penny, and the two of them lived in just a wee hovel on the estate. And when Jack came to be 5 years old, the Laird came round and he says, "The lad works for me now too." So Jack's job was to look out for the Laird's flock of sheep. And he spent his days where the sheep grazed by the woods. And if Jack saw a fox or a wolf or a poacher, to scream blue murder until they were scared off. And most of the time, Jack would sit under this big oak tree that everybody kent as Auld Croovy. Croovy was the king of the woods, and he was the oldest tree. And around him there grew a circle of younger trees, birch and oak and rowans. Now, as the years went by, Jack spent more and more time out there with the trees and the woods. His lugs tuned into the language of Mother Nature, the way you would with any other language. And Jack came to understand what the birds meant when they sang to one another. And one summer, when Jack was on the verge of being a young man and not a boy anymore, that midsummer day, Jack saw the birds were all flying up and leaving their nests in the trees. And so he asks the birds, "What's this all about?" And the birds say, "Jack, this is the 50th year. And every 50 years at midsummer, this is when Auld Croovy and the other trees, they rise out of the earth, out of their birth spots, and they go and drink at the burn, and they dance all night. And this is the time when the trees come together to mate and carry on their lineage." "Well," says Jack, "I never heard the like of this in all my life." "Well," says the bird, "ask your mother, for your mother will ken all about it." The Jack goes to his mum and she says, "Well, Jack, I was just a wee lassie the last time this happened, but I do mind folk speaking about it. Now, the thing you should ken, when Auld Croovy and his folk rise out of the earth, if you go down and look in their birth spots where they've risen from, you'll see that below their roots, there's a great store of jewels in the earth. Now, Croovy's is piled deep with treasure, but you'll see them under all the trees. And Jack, if you're going to go and see this, just be sure and not get too greedy. The trees will understand if you take 2 or 3 jewels to help you on your way, but don't take too many. And stay well away from Croovy's birth spot, for that runs deeper than you can ken." And Jack takes a wee package all wrapped up and she hands it to him and she says, "You keep this, and this will help you the night if you get stuck."
So, great stuff. Yeah. Yeah, isn't it? Very powerful. I mean, that's halfway through. I don't know whether you'd want to hear the whole of the story or whether we could afford to.
We could hear the whole story. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you like to? Yeah, fantastic.
Now, a wee while later, when Jack's out watching the sheep that afternoon, the servant lassie for the laird's house runs down to see him, and Jack was aye pleased to see her, for the two of them were great friends. "Jack," she says, "have you heard about the night? Well, I can tell you the laird knows too, he knows what's going to happen, and you must be sure he does not see you if you stay up. He'll be here too, trying to grab as many of the jewels as he can, and you know what he's like, he would kill you if he catches you here too." And by that time, late in the afternoon, all the birds had flown away from the trees, and there was an eerie quiet about the woods. And so time passes, and the midsummer night turns to midnight. Jack's waiting up by the old road when he feels this strange creaking feeling in the earth beneath him. And as if there was a band of unseen creatures playing tunes, he feels this eerie fairy rhythm fill the sky. And Jack sees old Cruvy and the other trees start to stretch and rise out of the earth. And they walk away down the hill to the barn. And the trees drink, and then they dance, whirling round and about one another. And all through the midsummer night, the trees are dancing and making love to one another. And Jack quietly walks to the place where the woods were, where the trees' birth spots stand empty. And sure enough, he can see below the roots, the earth is shining, glittering with the greens and blues of the jewels. And Jack steps down quickly into one of the younger trees' birth spots, where he can see the laird of the Black Hart is striding down from the house too with a great sack in his hand. And the laird leaps right into old Cruvy's birth spot, and he's cramming handfuls of jewels into his bag. And Jack just picks up a couple of jewels for the earth. And then he notices that the eerie music has stopped. And he looks up and he sees that the trees are starting to come back towards their homes. But Jack sees that he's sunk down too. He's sunk a couple of feet into the earth and now he can't reach the top of the hole that he's in. And he tries jumping and scrabbling, but he can't. And then he minds the package his mother gave him earlier. And he reaches into his pocket and he unravels it. And it's a reel of twine knotted into a strong ladder. And then he hears the voice of the servant lassie crying out, "Jack, Jack, is that you? Are you in there?" And he throws up the ladder and feels her catch it at the top. And he climbs out of the earth. The trees are close now, nearly back to where they'd started. And the two of them can hear that the laird with the Black Hart is still down in old Cruvy's birth spot, scrabbling about with the jewels. And the two of them look at one another. Without saying a word, the question goes between them, should we help him? And then they take each other's hands and they turn and run towards the dawn. As old Cruvy sinks back into his spot, and the laird with the Black Hart is crushed beneath the weight of the tree in his own greed. Now the twa jewels Jack had gathered up, that was enough for him to set his mum up with a better house, and for him and the lassie to start a good life together as well. And when the new laird came into the estate, the three of them told him they were needing a good few years back wages. And so that was not the end, but that was the start of things.
There we go. Fantastic. Yeah.
Not quite, perhaps I missed something, I'm a bit deaf. Where does that story, that version come from? Because it's not Jack and the Beanstalk, is it? There's no sound of a beanstalk. Oh, it's trees. Yeah. Yeah.
That story, Erin?
Yeah, so it's a story from the Scottish Traveller storytelling tradition, and that version is from a storyteller called Stanley Robertson. So it's a Aberdeenshire story.
It's a marvelous story, but it's kind of not Jack and the Beanstalk. That's all.
No, it's not.
No,
It's no, where it was yeah. And we're looking at the idea of this character Jack and the ways he's been represented, and yeah. You can throw it open that way if it's
I thought Camilla was going to say something.
yes.
Well, Do we want to do
The pantomime.
gender pantomime?
Yeah.
itself? Because that's something I'm
Can I
quite
swap
interested
places?
in.
You want,
Yeah,
you need to be next to
if it's easier for getting to the mic and to, it would be good to have just the
We've got
That-
the image.
the image that I
Yeah.
was going to talk to. Okay, am I on? Yeah, I'm on. If we can share screen on that image, I suppose that would be great. Okay. So what I'm going to do, it's not specific to Jack and the Beanstalk, though you can then think in those terms. But to track back this gender play and gender switching, which is so much at the heart of the British art form, the particularly English, Scottish, Irish, is it art form of pantomime. And it really is very crystal clear with pantomime dame and the principal boy. And I'm going to take it back quite a long way, but we'll start with Harlequino, who is the Commedia dell'arte, leader of the riot of all the characters like Pulcinella, Piero Connect to the Moon, Colombine. Now Harlequino, here is an image which really encapsulates the gender mixing going on in the performances of Harlequino, with getting armed with a hunter's bow and arrow as the goddess Diana of the hunt, and becoming totally female in looks, and yet a hunter. So this is all very fluid and very contradictory. Harlequino could do things like false pregnancies, breastfeeding, this type of presentation. Now, if we think about the name of Harlequin, actually, there is grounds to think that etymology, where that name comes from, connects to Herne the Hunter, the extraordinary figure of Herne the Hunter, who was cursed hunter, who went, because he went hunting on the Sabbath, was cursed to therefore hunt forever. He broke those rules. And with Herne were riding like mini devils, according to the monks' view of this. Mini devils were Harlequini, were riding by the saddle of Herne the Hunter. And these mini devils, well, actually, we can think of them, Harlequin in terms of trickster, and the mini devils with the trickster would be the spirits of the dead, exactly the spirits which, if we move, that's not come up too bright, unfortunately, because I kept the colours. But this image is from Bushman rock art, southern Bushman rock art, ancient rock art from Drakensberg Mountains. And if the Bushmen thought about these little tricks, these spirits of the dead, they would understand them in terms of the spirits that governed healing and coming back to life. Exactly that, coming back to life. So performing that magic. Now, why I have put these two images together is that the girl here, this dame with the moon and with the bows and arrows, actually, even though they're separated by like tens of thousands of years and tens of thousands of miles, are in some sense saying the same thing. This girl is saying the taboo of absolute no. She is both a he and a she with genitals, male and female, is both a human and an animal, with both a hunter and a hunted creature. She's got the powers of the rain. She is an image of what is known for Bushman peoples as first creation, a dreaming for the Bushmen. First creation governed by trickster. And it is the time before time when people had eland heads of antelope, when nothing was fixed, everything was changing, always changing, always changing. The idea of the trees in that story is of almost exact that moment when suddenly going to the other world, everything can walk, everything can talk and move. And the Bushmen in their experience of healing dance, the trees will be whirling, everything will be whirling around them, nothing is fixed. Now the girl's power coming from her menstruating, her first menstruation, when she's identified to the most sacred animal, Eland bull, she becomes male, but also a hunter. The potency of her blood is opening the door for the entire community to go into that first creation. Now, Alakino, as a trickster figure, is the prelude, is like the precursor coming down to the pantomime that was developed in urban theatrical context of the urban British working class in time of British Empire, late 19th century, early 20th century, when the industrial working class flexing its muscles, flexing its power. And this nose signal of the girl is like reverse dominance. It is turning over any kind of dominance or power that forces or exploits. That's what she's doing. Alakino, the Commedia dell'arte, is also producing all this comedy, this laughter, overthrowing, turning world upside down, creating chaos, Lord and misrule. And in the pantomimes, that emerge from this fairy tale world is when the children of urban working class, the families of urban working class, are seeing these fairy tales, these fairy tale worlds, this other world being conjured. And they're using all the tricks and the trades of these ancient signals. And this is literally a depiction of one of the oldest rituals of the world, of reversal of dominance, reversal of power of anyone to coerce and say, no, we're not. It is a depiction of a picket line moving into first creation, an ability to come back from the dead with that. Now, what's so extraordinary in this image with Alakino, we almost have an ancestress of pantomime Dane. It's like all of the aspects of it's a male Harlequin, but got all this female attributes, as well as being hunter as well. So it's very contradictory, associate to the moon. This girl in her ritual will associate with the moon. Lunarchy, the changes of the phases of the moon. So periodicity that Chris is describing. And that's the pantomime Dane. The girl here, the initiate girl, maybe the principal boy, or the ancestress of principal boy. They flip between the wrong sex, they flip between the wrong species, they're not just humans, they're hybridized, and they even identify to each other. They even identify to each other so that the girl can become the old mum or auntie, the mum or auntie can become the girl. We hear this in hunter-gatherer stories, that is regularity. What's so interesting is that with the urban working class that developed the form of pantomime, gender signals and this gender play and switching was very crystallized, pantomime Dane, principal boy, and became a real source, a real way, the joking that's happening with it, the creating somebody's gender anew, changing it around. It could be ways for the girls to hide and evade. It could be ways to make fun of the mother, the old mum. It could be, or the ugly sisters. Nearly always these pantomime dames are figures of kinship. Mothers, aunties, sisters. The ugly sisters would be in the Cinderella story, which fundamentally means that Chris's analysis of Cinderella fundamentally means they're menstruating sisters, whereas Cinderella is past menstruating. She's kind of different from that. It's not that one's beautiful and they're ugly. That's what. Just a few more. Shall I say a little more about the history of comedy in general?
Yeah.
We want to.
If we're able, are you going to carry on? Is it going to tie in?
It'll tie in with this.
Right. It's just what I don't know if people have seen especially on Zoom, your fantastic coat, Camilla. It's wonderful.
Yeah, the government day coat. Yeah, there's pantomime flounce coat. Yes, yes. Principal boy might have been very a bit gender mixed up here. So we're looking at comedy dell'arte, 16th, 17th century, that imagery, prelude to the 19th, 20th century emergence of kind of, as far as I understand, British pantomime at that particular time. And how that was, you know, that was getting into the whole shoot. The voices were coming up from below in the British pantomime. We can think of all the carnival, all the dialogic carnival of Batin, the Rabelais as well, and so forth. In terms of comedic structure, if we take the two sort of enormous geniuses of comedy, going all the way back to ancient Greece, ancient Athens, Aristophanes, and also Shakespeare, the most woman-empowering play of Shakespeare. I'm just going to say a couple of things about those guys, because again, gender switching is just heart of comedic structure. It's always there. Aristophanes, if you've ever heard of him, from 5th century BCE Athens, author of a number of great comedies, including comedies of women taking over, including Lysistrata, the famous play of the sex strike, when women together drink wine, which is as if they're sort of menstruating together. And in that play, they have a magistrate who the women dress as a female. Aristophanes also had Ecclesia Zeusae, which is the women taking over the assembly, and Thesmophoria Zeusae, which is women engaged in the most sort of identifying Greek ritual, Thesmophoria, of Greek city-states. That was run by women, female kin coalitions, making blood sacrifices to Demeter and Persephone, and so forth. Now, so Aristophanes was building his comedies on traditions of this komoi, this Dionysiac revelry, but he was pulling into his, high art presented in the the Athenian state theatre. He was pulling into it real material from women's experience of ritual culture, actually holding Thesma. Male political business suspended, women take over the Acropolis, take over the areas to celebrate Thesmophoria. There is all this actual ritual experience written into his plays. He knew about it. And he's got this gender switching, men hiding as if they're in women's clothes to spy on the women, putting it in there into the comedy. And it's just the typical structure. Roll forward 2,000 years more to Shakespeare. What were the sources for Shakespeare? Because the most woman-empowering comedy, and I'm talking about The Merry Wives of Windsor. Let me tell you what Engels had to say about The Merry Wives of Windsor. Engels spot on. There is more life and reality in the first act of Merry Wives of Windsor than in all of German literature. This is Engels writing to Congress. And yes, he's right. So what's happening there? Well, he always had an unerring instinct for sexual communism, if we think about Origins of the Family. Shakespeare's play has a whole lot of fun with pompous husbands endeavoring to assert marital proprietorial rights over their wives. But structurally, the drama celebrates women's collective carnival freedom. Ritually potent laughter, riot, rituals of license, subversion of established order were called the misrule by the powers that be. Comedy, in its formal dramatic sense, has its roots in popular ritual action and ritual uprising, expressed most especially the female kind, is how it's really expressed. So just to say about the Merry Wives of Windsor with Falstaff, the famous, I don't know how many, because it isn't the most touted of Shakespeare's plays, but Falstaff acts as the lunar trickster in this play. He is also the founding power for creating English kingship, but he is yeah, how much I have to explain on it, I can't do it all, but I'm trying to say where were the actual sources Well, one thing we know, Harlequin connects to Herne the hunter. Falstaff in the end of the play, who's prowling around the oak tree of Windsor, which is Herne's oak, and he's identified wearing the horns of a great stag. He's the fattest stag in the Windsor forest. He's wearing these horns, prowling around. When the women have planned this whole sort of festival celebration of poking fun at him, torturing him, taunting him, and making fun of their husbands at the same time. They have a young girl who's like the initiate, who would be played like a principal boy role in amongst they're the mums and aunties, and they've got their young girl there. But some of the sources, the mythology of Herne the Hunter, which is coming down through the lineage of Harlequin, but also mummers' plays, which would be very much indigenous plays for English or local, or sources for maybe urban English environments, working environments. And the mummers' plays would be things like Christmas time, pantomime time at Christmas, very much this season, New Year. Father Christmas, great big fat, rather like Falstaff with sometimes with horns, bull's horns, big fat and red like that. The bigness and fatness of Falstaff is Luna Trickster. And the Father Christmas would be this trickster officiator between the Knight of France or the King of France and the King of England having a battle. And one of them will die, or it could be St. George and the Turkish knight, and one of them dies. And then Father Christmas has this healing, again, that trickster healing powder in his hand, that if he applies it to the groin of that knight, he can bring him back to life again, or with the help of a doctor as well. He's got to be a medical doctor. They were getting their hands on the trade at that stage and getting the women out. So this was typical late Middle Ages, early modern. These mummers' plays would have been sources that Shakespeare was bringing into. The one last point I'd like to make on the idea of pantomime, all mimicry, a mimicry of everything, pantomimos in the Greek sense, because that would go back to the Aristophanes Dionysiac comoi traditions of making fun through mimicry. Well, it's something we haven't talked about today, but it's very important, something that we absolutely know about as the technique of egalitarian leveling is called Mwajo by the Bayaka in the Congo forest. And it is the way that if some person has been obnoxious, and it's often a man, but it's not always a man, it can also be even a child or a woman, then the others in the camp, well, they wait for older women to do it. Older women are the ones who are really skilled at this. And the old lady who's really clever at it, she'll start by mimicking something that guy did that got on everybody's nerves. And she'll just start a little bit of movement, and the others will begin to see, and they'll think, oh, who's that? Oh, yeah, that's what it is. And then some of them might join in with her copying and mimicking what that guy was doing. And they start to join together. And so you get gatherings of people having a hilarious time in the camp while this guy who's too big for his boots is sort of watching and thinking, what are they laughing at? What are they laughing at? Until at that moment, he realizes they're laughing at me. And he's either got to laugh himself and rejoin the human race, or he'll run off into the forest and just leave. As long as he does one of those two things, then the next time they see him, they've forgotten all about it. It's gone. But he picked up what they were doing. So he knows that whatever he did, he was an absolute arsehole. And he's not going to do that again. So that effect of comedy of Mwajo for leveling down anybody who's just too big for their boots that will be ancient. That will be even before we have language, that technique. I would even rate some Homo erectus as doing some of that. that mimicry, that moiety. Okay, I think I've said
That's
enough.
great, yes.
But yeah, anybody has more questions about it, we can take them.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, I'll resume my throne.
That's good.